The entire restaurant went silent. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor of the Azure Lounge. Silas Sterling, a man worth $12 billion, had just slammed his hand on the table, his face red with fury. He pointed a trembling finger at the waitress standing over him with a coffee pot. I said, "Stay out of this. You pour the coffee. You do not speak. Do you understand?" Most people would have run away in tears, but Elena didn't flinch. She just adjusted her apron, looked him dead in the eye, and said the 7 words that would cost him, or save him, $100 million. Check the date on the Cayman clause. What happened next didn't just stop a deal, it destroyed a dynasty. This is the story of how an invisible waitress outsmarted Wall Street's most dangerous sharks. Elena Vance knew the rules of survival in New York City better than anyone. Rule number 1. When you are wearing the beige uniform of the Azure Lounge, you are not a person. You are furniture. You are a ghost. You are a pair of hands that delivers sparkling water and removes empty plates. At 26, Elena had perfected the art of being invisible. To the titans of industry who frequented the exclusive Manhattan Club, she was just Miss, or Hey You. They didn't know that 3 years ago she had been top of her class at Columbia Law, specializing in corporate forensic accounting. They didn't know she had an eidetic memory that allowed her to recall complex tax codes as easily as breathing. And they certainly didn't know that she was working double shifts as a waitress because her father, a once respected auditor, had been framed for embezzlement and driven to an early grave by a shadowy corporate cabal. Tonight, the Azure Lounge was buzzing with a specific kind of tension, the smell of blood in the water. Table 4 was the center of the universe tonight. Sitting there was Silas Sterling. At 32, Silas was the youngest CEO in the history of Sterling Vanguard, a logistics empire he had inherited and expanded aggressively. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of cold steel, but tonight he looked exhausted. His tie was loosened slightly, a rare sign of weakness. Opposite him sat Damon Cross. When Elena saw Cross, her blood ran cold. She gripped the silver serving tray so hard her knuckles turned white. Damon Cross was a shark in a 3-piece suit. He was the head of Cross Global, a private equity firm known for stripping companies for parts. He was also the man who had manufactured the evidence that sent her father to prison. Elena took a breath, forcing her heart rate to slow. She had to approach the table. It was her job. "Gentlemen," she said softly, placing fresh glasses of water on the table. Neither man looked at her. "The valuation is solid, Silas," Cross was saying, his voice smooth like oil. $100 million for the logistics software division. It's a steal. You need the liquidity to cover the port expansion in Singapore. If you don't sign tonight, the board will vote you out by Monday morning. You know it, and I know it. Silas rubbed his temples. The software is the backbone of our tracking system, Damon. If I sell it to you, I'm leasing back my own technology. At a very favorable rate. Cross smiled, tapping a thick stack of documents with a gold fountain pen. Look, I've had my legal team draft the acquisition papers. It's standard boilerplate. We keep the IP, you get the cash infusion, and you stay CEO. Everyone wins. Elena moved around the table, topping off Silas's water. As she leaned in, her eyes darted to the papers spread out on the table. Because of her condition, her photographic memory, she didn't read like normal people. She absorbed. In the 3 seconds it took to pour the water, her eyes scanned the upside-down text on page 42 of the contract. Subsection 14b, Transfer of Intellectual Property. Clause 3, all subsidiary rights, including future iterations and algorithmic derivatives, shall transfer irrevocably to Cross Global upon signature. Jurisdiction, Seychelles Shell Co. 4491. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't just a sale, it was a slaughter. The future iterations clause meant that if Sterling Vanguard developed any new software in the next 10 years, Cross would own that too. Silas wasn't just selling a division, he was handing over the future of his entire company. She stepped back, her mind racing. Don't do it, Elena. You need this job. You need the tips to pay for your mum's care home. Walk away. But then she looked at Damon Cross's smug face, the same face that had sneered at her father in court. Silas picked up his pen. His hand was shaking slightly. Fine, he whispered. I don't have a choice. Smart man, Cross grinned. Elena couldn't help it. She stepped forward again, pretending to reach for a napkin holder. As she did, she accidentally nudged the contract, causing the papers to fan out. Oh, terribly sorry, sir, she murmured. Silas looked up, annoyed. Watch it. My apologies, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Silas could hear. You might want to read the definition of derivatives on page 42 before you sign that. Silas froze. The air at table 4 changed instantly. Silas Sterling didn't look at page 42 immediately. Instead, he slowly lifted his head to look at the waitress. For the first time all night, he actually saw her. He saw the intelligence burning behind her hazel eyes, the tension in her jaw. What did you say? Silas asked, his voice dangerously low. Damon Cross, sensing a disruption in his carefully orchestrated trap, snapped his head toward Elena. She's just a clumsy waitress, Silas. Ignore her. Sign the papers so we can order champagne. Cross turned his glare on Elena. Get away from this table before I have you fired. Elena took a step back, clutching her tray. I was just clearing the— No, Silas cut in. He hadn't moved his eyes from Elena. You said something about page 42. Why? Sir, I really shouldn't, Elena started, her survival instinct warring with her desire for justice. Speak, Silas commanded. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed by thousands of employees. The clause regarding algorithmic derivatives, Elena said, her voice steadying. It's not standard boilerplate. It's structured as a total IP seizure. If you sign that, Cross Global won't just own your current software. They'll own the code for the autonomous drone project you're building in secret in Nevada. It falls under future iterations. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Damon Cross stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is outrageous. Silas, are you going to let the help give you legal advice? She probably overheard something on the news and thinks she's an expert. This is a private negotiation. Cross turned on Elena, his face twisting into a snarl. You listen to me, you little insignificant. Shut up, Damon, Silas said. He wasn't looking at Cross. He was flipping through the contract, his eyes scanning frantically. He found page 42. He read it. Then he read it again. His face went pale. Then it went red. He looked up at Cross. You knew about the drone project. I don't know what you're talking about, Cross lied, adjusting his cufflinks, though a bead of sweat appeared on his forehead. It's standard language, Silas. You're being paranoid. This clause allows you to seize assets that haven't even been patented yet. Silas slammed the contract down. Silas, look at me, Cross said, trying to regain control, his voice rising. We have a deal on the table. 100 million. You need this. Not at this price, Silas shouted back. You are listening to a waitress, Cross yelled, pointing a finger at Elena. She's nobody. She's nothing. She's probably high. He turned to Elena, his eyes full of malice. You stupid girl. Do you know how much money you just cost this room? Stay out of this. You pour the coffee. You do not speak. Do you understand? That was the moment. The hook, the scream that echoed through the restaurant. Every head turned. The manager, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, came running from the back. "What is going on here? Elena, what have you done?" Mr. Henderson gasped, looking terrified at the anger on the billionaires' faces. Elena felt small. She felt the weight of her poverty, her uniform, her past. But she looked at Cross, and she saw the fear in his eyes. He was afraid of being exposed. "I didn't do anything, Mr. Henderson," Elena said calmly. She looked at Silas. "I just corrected a math error, a $100 million error." Silas stared at her. The anger in his face shifted. It wasn't directed at her anymore. He looked at Cross, then down at the contract. He picked up the heavy document, ripped it in half, and threw the pieces onto the floor. "The deal is off, Damon," Silas said, his voice ice cold. "Get out of my sight before I call the SEC and have them look into your Seychelles Shell Company." Damon Cross looked like he had been slapped. He gathered his briefcase, his face a mask of pure hatred. He leaned in close to Silas. "You'll regret this, Sterling. You'll be bankrupt in a month." Then Cross turned to Elena. "And you, I will make sure you never work in this city again." He stormed out. The restaurant remained silent. Mr. Henderson was trembling. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I am so sorry. She is fired immediately. Elena, get your things and—" "No," Silas said. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Elena. He was tall, towering over her, smelling of expensive cologne and stress. "You're not firing her," Silas told the manager without looking at him. "In fact, I need to borrow her." He looked down at Elena. "Who are you?" "I'm just a waitress, sir." "Elena." "No, you're not," Silas said, shaking his head. "Waitresses don't spot jurisdiction traps in private equity contracts upside down. Who are you, really?" "I used to study law. A long time ago." Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a black titanium card, his personal business card. He handed it to her. "My car is outside. My shift is over in 10 minutes, he said. "Meet me in the car. I have a job for you." "I have a job," Elena said, gesturing to the restaurant. "Not anymore," Mr. Henderson snapped. "If you walk out that door with him, don't bother coming back, Elena. You caused a scene." Elena looked at the manager, then at Silas Sterling. She thought about the unpaid bills on her kitchen counter. She thought about her father. She thought about Damon Cross's threat. She untied her apron and dropped it on the table, right next to the spilled water. "I'll see you in the car, Mr. Sterling." The rain began to fall, just as Eleanor Vance stepped out of the service entrance of the Azure Lounge, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind her. It sounded like a prison cell closing. She stood on the wet pavement of 54th Street, shivering in her thin beige uniform, clutching her purse. A sleek, black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The rear window rolled down silently. "Get in," Silas Sterling said. Eleanor hesitated. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a waitress who lived in a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens. He was a man who appeared on the cover of Forbes. Getting into this car was insanity. It was the kind of decision that people in movies made right before they disappeared. But she thought of the eviction notice tucked into her mailbox that morning. She thought of the nursing home calling her twice a day about her mother's rising medical bills. She opened the door and slid onto the cream-colored leather seats. The car smelled of cedar and rain. It was warm, quiet, and terrifyingly expensive. "Driver, the tower," Silas commanded. The partition between them and the driver slid up, sealing them in a soundproof glass cage. Silas didn't look at her. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the armrest. "Drink?" "No," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. She cleared her throat and sat up straighter. "No, thank you." "Suit yourself." He took a sip, grimacing as the alcohol hit his throat. He turned to face her, his eyes assessing her like she was a balance sheet that didn't add up. "Let's cut the pleasantries. You're not a waitress. I checked the employee roster on my phone while I was waiting. You've been working at Azure for 8 months. Before that, you were scrubbing floors at a gym in Brooklyn. Before that, nothing." "I like to keep a low profile," Elena said, gripping her purse. "You have an eidetic memory," Silas stated, not asking. "You spotted a nested jurisdictional clause in a document that was 3 feet away, upside down, in dim lighting. That's not a parlor trick. That's a weapon. Where did you acquire it?" Elena looked out the window at the blurred city lights passing by. "I was born with the memory, the legal knowledge. I acquired that at Columbia Law School." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Columbia. You graduated?" "Top of my class. Law review. Offered a clerkship with the Supreme Court," Elena said softly. "So why are you serving sparkling water to sharks like Damon Cross instead of eating them for lunch?" Elena turned to him. The pain was old, but it still stung. "Because the Bar Association doesn't give licenses to the daughters of convicted felons. At least, not without a character and fitness review that lasts forever. My father was Marcus Vance." Silas froze. The glass halted halfway to his mouth. "Marcus Vance? The auditor for the state treasury? The one who stole $5 million from the pension fund?" "He didn't steal it," Elena said, her voice turning hard as diamond. "He found it missing. He was investigating a shell company called Apex Horizons. When he got too close, the money suddenly appeared in his personal offshore account, an account he never opened. He was framed. He died of a heart attack in prison 6 months into his sentence." Silas set his drink down. The arrogance faded from his face, replaced by a calculating intensity. "And who was the lead witness against him?" "A junior analyst named Gregory Pike," Elena said, "who now works as the chief strategy officer for Cross Global." The car went silent. The connection hung in the air between them. "Damon Cross," Silas whispered. "He took out your father to cover his tracks on the pension fund raid." "I can't prove it," Elena said. "Not yet. I've been tracking Cross's deals for 3 years. I took the job at Azure because I knew he held his closing dinners there. I was waiting for him to slip up. Tonight, he did." Silas leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked exhausted, the weight of his $12 billion empire crushing him. "Well, Elena Vance, it seems we have a common enemy. Cross isn't just trying to buy my software division. He's trying to kill Sterling Vanguard. He's been shorting my stock for weeks. He knew about the liquidity crisis before my own board did." He looked her in the eye. "I don't need a waitress. I don't even need a lawyer. I have an army of those, and they're all useless because they're too scared to tell me the truth. I need a bloodhound. I need someone who can look at a mountain of numbers and see the knife hidden inside." "What are you offering?" Elena asked. "A job, consultant, internal audit. You answer only to me. You have full access to the mainframe, the archives, the physical files, everything. And the pay? $20,000 a month, plus a bonus if we survive the week." Elena's breath hitched. 20,000. That would pay off the nursing home for a year. It would give her a life back. "But there's a catch," Silas added, his eyes narrowing. "There always is. My company is leaking. Someone on the inside, someone high up, is feeding information to Cross. That's how he knew about the drone project. If you come with me, you're walking into a snake pit. If they find out who you are, or what you're doing, they will destroy you. Cross destroyed your father from the outside. Imagine what he can do with an insider helping him." Elena looked down at her hands. They were calloused from carrying trays and scrubbing tables. She had spent 3 years hiding, afraid of the shadow that had swallowed her family. But hiding hadn't saved her father, and it wouldn't save her. She looked up at Silas. "I don't care about the snakes, Mr. Sterling. I just want the head of the snake. If you give me access, I will find your leak. But I want one thing in return." "Name it." "When we take Cross down, I get the files on Apex Horizons. I want to clear my father's name." Silas extended his hand. "Deal." Elena shook it. His grip was warm and firm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. "One more thing," Silas said, reaching for the intercom. "We need to make a stop before the office. You can't walk into Sterling Tower wearing a polyester uniform smelling of French fries." He pressed the button. "Driver, change of destination. Take us to the Pierre and call my stylist. Tell her it's an emergency." Sterling Tower rose 70 stories above Midtown Manhattan, a monolith of steel and blue glass that seemed to pierce the sky. It was 1 a.m., but the building was alive. Light spilled from the upper floors where the crisis teams were working. Elena stepped out of the elevator on the 70th floor, the executive penthouse. She was transformed. The polyester uniform was gone. In its place, she wore a tailored charcoal pantsuit that Silas had paid an exorbitant rush fee to have fitted at 11:30 p.m. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out straight, framing her face. She wore glasses with thin gold frames, fake lenses, but they acted as a shield, a barrier between her and the world. She looked like a shark. She felt like an imposter. Silas walked beside her, his stride long and purposeful. "Chin up," he muttered. "If you look like you don't belong, they'll eat you alive. You are Elena Vance, Senior Strategy Analyst. You transferred from the London office. That's the cover." "I've never been to London," she whispered back. "Neither have half the people in this building who claim they have. Just don't talk about the weather." They pushed through the double-glass doors into the main conference room. The room was filled with tension and the smell of stale coffee. Around the massive mahogany table sat the inner circle of Sterling Vanguard. There were 6 of them, men and women in expensive suits who looked like they hadn't slept in days. The conversation stopped abruptly as Silas entered. "Silas!" A woman at the head of the table stood up. She was striking, with platinum blonde hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like chips of ice. She wore a white suit that cost more than Elena's entire education. This was Veronica Thorne, the chief financial officer. Elena recognized her immediately from the financial news. She was known as the Ice Queen of Wall Street. "Where have you been?" Veronica demanded, her voice tight. "Damon Cross just called me. He's furious. He says you tore up the contract and insulted him in public. Do you have any idea what you've done? The board is convening an emergency vote at 8:20 a.m. They're going to oust you, Silas." "Let them try," Silas said calmly, walking to the head of the table. "I'm not selling the software division, Veronica. Not to Cross, and certainly not with the IP clauses he buried in the fine print." "Fine print?" A heavy-set man with a red face spoke up. "That was Arthur Pym, the general counsel. I reviewed that contract, Silas. It was standard." "You missed the Cayman clause, Arthur," Silas said, throwing his jacket onto a chair. "Which makes me wonder if you're incompetent or complicit." Arthur's face turned a deeper shade of crimson. "Now, see here." "Enough," Silas cut him off. He gestured to Elena. "This is Elena Vance. She's joining the team as a special consultant for the audit. Veronica's eyes snapped to Elena. She scanned her from head to toe, her gaze lingering on Elena's shoes, which were new, bought by Silas, and her face. It was a look of pure, predatory assessment. "Consultant?" Veronica scoffed. "From where? McKinsey? Bain?" "Independent," Elena said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady, despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "My background is in forensic accounting and liability mitigation." "We don't need a forensic accountant," Veronica snapped. "We need a miracle. We have 48 hours to come up with $100 million to pay the bondholders, or this company goes into receivership. And since Silas just blew up our only lifeline, I suggest we focus on drafting his resignation letter." "We aren't resigning," Silas said. "Elena is going to find the money." The room went silent. Some of the executives chuckled nervously. "Find it?" Arthur asked. "Where? Under the couch cushions? We've leveraged every asset we have." "I'm going to review the books," Elena said, stepping forward. She walked to the whiteboard where a complex diagram of the company's cash flow was drawn. She picked up a marker. Specifically the operational overhead for the logistics fleet in the Pacific sector. "That's a waste of time," Veronica said quickly. Too quickly. Elena caught the tone. She turned to look at the CFO. "Is it? Because in the annual report, the fuel costs for the Pacific fleet went up 40% last quarter. Oil prices only rose 5%. Where did the other 35% go?" Veronica stiffened. "Inefficiencies, old ships. We're phasing them out." "Or," Elena said, uncapping the marker, "phantom vendors." She wrote 2 words on the board. "Redundancy check. I need access to the raw server logs for the procurement department, going back 5 years." Veronica slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. We don't have time for a witch hunt. Silas, get this girl out of here." Silas smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. "Actually, Veronica, I think she's on to something. Give her the access." "I can't just grant access to a stranger," Veronica protested. "Security protocols. I am the CEO," Silas roared. The power of his voice shook the room. "I am the majority shareholder, and this is my company. Give her the passwords, or you can pack your desk right now." Veronica glared at him, her chest heaving. Then she looked at Elena with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. She reached into her purse, pulled out a keycard, and slid it across the mahogany table. "Fine," Veronica hissed. "But when she finds nothing, and we're all bankrupt on Monday morning, remember that this was your choice, Silas." Elena picked up the card. It was warm from Veronica's hand. "Everyone out," Silas ordered. "Except Elena." The executives filed out, grumbling and whispering. Arthur Pym shot Silas a worried look before closing the door. When they were alone, Silas slumped into his chair. The bravado vanished. He put his head in his hands. "That was close," he muttered. "She's hiding something," Elena said immediately. "Did you see her neck flush when I mentioned fuel costs?" "Veronica has been with the company since my father's days," Silas said. "She's family." "Judas was an apostle," Elena countered. She sat down at the table and opened her laptop, connecting to the secure Wi-Fi using Veronica's credentials. "I need coffee. A lot of it. We have 48 hours to find where she buried the bodies." Silas watched her typing furiously. "You really think you can find $100 million in missing fuel receipts?" Elena didn't look up. Her eyes were darting across lines of code streaming on her screen. "I'm not looking for fuel receipts, Silas. I'm looking for a pattern. Fraud is like music. It has a rhythm. If you break the rhythm, the song falls apart." She stopped typing. She hit enter. "Gotcha," she whispered. "What?" Silas stood up and walked behind her. "Look at this." She pointed to a column of numbers. Every Friday at $4 p.m., a transfer of $48,000 is made to a vendor called Neptune Supply Cabanos for MISC maintenance. It's under the reporting threshold, so it doesn't trigger an automatic audit. So, it's maintenance. Silas, Elena turned to him. Neptune Supply Co. lists its address as a P.O. box in Delaware, and the IP address approving the invoices? Yeah? It's coming from inside this building, specifically from a terminal on the 12th floor. What's on the 12th floor? Silas asked. Elena's face went pale. The IT server room, but also the archives. Silas grabbed his jacket. Let's go. Wait, Elena said. If we go down there, and whoever is doing this sees us, they'll wipe the drive. We need to catch them in the act. It's 2 a.m., Silas said. Who would be in the archives at 2 a.m.? Just then, Elena's screen flickered. A red dialog box popped up. Unauthorized access detected. System purge initiated. They know we're here, Elena gasped. They're deleting the evidence. Silas grabbed her hand. Run! The elevators in Sterling Tower were designed to move at a velocity of 8 meters per second, a marvel of modern engineering meant to whisk executives to the summit of the world in silence. But tonight, as Silas and Elena slammed into Car 4, the silence felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. 12th floor, Silas barked at the voice-activated panel. Priority override. Authorization, Sterling Alpha 1. The doors hissed shut. The car began to descend. The purge was at 14% when we left the room, Elena said, her eyes fixed on the digital floor indicator, counting down. 69. 65. 60. If they wipe the procurement logs, we lose the paper trail. We lose the leverage. You lose the company. We're going to stop them, Silas said, loosening his tie. He looked at Elena. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the elevator, she looked fierce. The waitress from the Azure Lounge had vanished. In her place was a warrior. Elena, if we walk in there, and it's security, if it's dangerous. I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, Silas. She cut him off, checking the heavy tablet she had swiped from the conference room. I've handled drunks twice your size with nothing but a cocktail tray. I can handle a corporate IT guy. The elevator jolted. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the ominous red glow of the emergency backup. They cut the power, Silas realized. They know we're coming. The car slammed to a halt. The display read, Floor 15. 3 floors up, Silas cursed. He pried the doors open with a grunt of exertion. They opened onto a dark hallway. Stairs! They ran. Elena kicked off her heels, running barefoot on the industrial carpet. They burst into the stairwell, the sound of their breathing echoing in the concrete shaft. Down 3 flights. Silas hit the door to the 12th floor with his shoulder, bursting through. The server room was a cavern of humming machinery, bathed in the cool blue light of thousands of blinking LEDs. The air was freezing, kept at a constant 60 degrees to protect the processors, and smelled of ozone and static. Over there, Elena whispered, pointing. At the far end of the server rows, a terminal was active. A figure in a dark hoodie was hunched over the keyboard, typing frantically. On the large wall monitor above them, a red progress bar was crawling forward. System purge, 45% complete. Hey! Silas shouted, his voice booming through the server racks. The figure froze, then spun around. It wasn't a security guard. It wasn't an IT technician. It was Arthur Pym, the general counsel. The heavy-set lawyer looked terrified. Sweat was pouring down his red face, soaking the collar of his expensive shirt. He held a heavy magnetic degausser in his hand, a device used to permanently scramble hard drives. Arthur? Silas stopped, stunned. What are you doing? I have to, Silas, Arthur stammered, backing up against the mainframe. They have photos of me in Macau, with the girls, the gambling debts. I didn't have a choice. Who? Silas demanded, stepping forward. Cross, Arthur yelled, his voice cracking. He owns everything, Silas. He bought my debt 3 years ago. He's been reading your emails through my account since the merger talks began. He told me if I didn't wipe the logs tonight, he'd send the photos to my wife. To the Bar Association. Arthur, turn it off, Silas said, his voice low and dangerous. I can't, Arthur screamed. He raised the Degorsa. I have to finish it. If the company goes under, Cross promised me a job in Zurich. He lunged for the master drive bay. No, Elena shouted. She didn't wait for Silas. She sprinted down the aisle of servers. Arthur swung the heavy magnetic wand at her, a desperate, clumsy blow. Elena ducked, sliding on her knees across the polished floor. She grabbed the power cable of the terminal Arthur was using and yanked it with all her strength. Sparks showered down as the cable ripped free. The terminal went black, but the wall monitor didn't stop. System purge, 58% complete. It's not running locally, Elena realized, scrambling to her feet. He initiated a remote command. Pulling the plug won't stop it. Arthur was sobbing now, slumped against a rack. It's too late. It's gone. Silas grabbed Arthur by the lapels and slammed him against a server rack. What is the kill code, Arthur? There's always a kill code for a remote wipe. I don't know. Veronica set up the protocol, Arthur wailed. Veronica, Silas growled. He looked at Elena. Can you stop it? Elena was already at a different terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm trying to bypass the firewall, but Veronica locked it down with biometric encryption. I need a fingerprint or a retinal scan. Purge. 70% complete. We don't have Veronica, Silas said. Think, Elena. Think, she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes for a split second, diving into her memory. She visualized the contract she had seen at the restaurant. She visualized the sticky notes she had seen on Veronica's desk in the conference room when she swiped the keycard. She remembered a photo on Veronica's desk, a picture of a dog, a golden retriever, and a date written on the collar tag in the photo, 05/12/18. It's not biometric, Elena said, her eyes snapping open. Veronica is old school. She doesn't trust the cloud. She uses a manual override. Elena typed, admin override. Password prompt, enter, phrase. What's the password? Silas asked, hovering over her shoulder. She's a narcissist, Elena muttered, and she loves that dog more than she loves this company, Elena typed, Lady Macbeth 0512. Access denied. Damn it, Elena cursed. Purge, 85% complete. Try Cross, Silas suggested. No, Elena said. She hates Cross. She's working with him, but she hates him. She loves money. Wait. Elena remembered something else. In the restaurant, Cross had mentioned a specific shell company, Seychelles Shell Co. Dara 4-4-91. Why 4-4-91? It wasn't a random number. It was a date, April 4th, 9191. Silas, when was Sterling Vanguard Incorporated? Elena asked. April 4th, 1991, Silas said. My father founded it. She doesn't want to destroy the company, Elena realized. She wants to own it. She thinks she's saving it from you. Elena typed, Founder 999991. The screen flashed green. Access granted. Elena's fingers blawed. Command, abort! 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 The red bar on the wall froze at 98%. The room went silent, save for the hum of the cooling fans. The red light of the purge warning flickered and turned to a steady green. Data restored. Elena slumped over the keyboard, breathing hard. Silas let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 10 years. You did it, Silas whispered. He looked at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. You actually did it. We have the files, Elena said. pulling a USB drive from her pocket and jamming it into the port. "I'm copying everything. The phantom vendor payments, the communications with Cross, the offshore accounts, everything Arthur was trying to delete." Silas turned back to Arthur Pym. The lawyer was sliding down the server rack, weeping into his hands. "Get up, Arthur," Silas said coldly. "Silas, please," Arthur begged. "I have a family." "That's the only reason I'm not throwing you out that window," Silas said. "You're going to go to the police. You're going to turn yourself in. You're going to tell them everything about Cross's blackmail scheme. If you do that, I'll make sure my lawyers argue for leniency. If you run, I will hunt you down." Arthur nodded frantically. "I will, I promise." "Go." Arthur scrambled up and ran out of the room, leaving his shoes behind in his panic. Silas turned to Elena. The download bar on her screen hit 100%. She pulled the drive out. "We have the smoking gun," she said, holding the small silver stick up. "But we can't stay here. Veronica will get a notification that the purge was aborted. Security will be here in 2 minutes." "My penthouse is compromised," Silas said. "My driver is probably on Cross's payroll. We can't go to my hotel." "Then where do we go?" Elena asked. "Who do you trust?" Silas looked at her. For the first time all night, the billionaire looked vulnerable. He looked at the waitress in the ill-fitting suit, holding the fate of his empire in her hand. "I trust you," he said. "Take me to your place." The sun was beginning to rise over the Queensboro Bridge, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. The taxi, a yellow cab Elena had hailed on the street after they snuck out through the freight-loading dock, pulled up to a crumbling brick building in Astoria. "This is it," Elena said, paying the driver with cash. "It's not much." Silas Sterling, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than the building, looked up at the peeling paint and the fire escape rusting on the facade. "It's perfect. No one would look for me here." They walked up the 4 flights of stairs. Elena's legs burned. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She unlocked the door to apartment 4B. The apartment was tiny, a studio with a kitchenette, a pull-out couch, and walls covered in bookshelves. Stacks of legal textbooks were piled everywhere. A map of Manhattan was taped to the wall, covered in red string connecting sticky notes, her investigation into Cross and her father's case. Silas walked in, looking around with genuine curiosity. He saw the map. He walked over to it, tracing the lines with his finger. "You've been fighting this war alone for 3 years," he said softly. "I didn't have a choice," Elena said, locking the deadbolt and sliding the chain across. She went to the kitchenette and filled a kettle. "Tea?" "I don't have scotch." "Tea is fine," Silas said. He turned to face her. "You always have a choice, Elena. You could have walked away. You could have taken the easy road." "My father didn't raise me to take the easy road," she said. "He raised me to balance the books." She set the mugs down on the small coffee table and plugged the USB drive into her battered laptop. Silas sat next to her on the couch. Their knees touched. The proximity was electric. "Okay," Elena said, opening the files. "Let's see what we bought with $100 million. She opened the folder labeled Neptune Supply Co. It wasn't just fuel receipts. It was a ledger, a detailed record of bribes paid to port officials in Singapore, Jakarta, and Rotterdam. But as Elena scrolled down, she found something else. A subfolder labeled Project Lazarus. "What is Project Lazarus?" Silas asked. Elena clicked it. A PDF opened. It was a dossier. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. "What?" "It's not just about your company, Silas. Look at the beneficiary." Silas leaned in. The money from the Neptune account wasn't going to Cross directly. It was being funneled into a medical research facility in Zurich. a facility specializing in experimental treatments for early-onset dementia, Silas read. He went pale. Who has dementia? Elena asked. Silas stood up, pacing the small room. He looked like he was going to be sick. Veronica's husband, Robert. He's been sick for years. The treatments, they cost millions. Insurance doesn't cover the experimental stuff. So Cross got to her, Elena realized. He didn't bribe her with greed. He bribed her with hope. He offered to pay for her husband's treatment in exchange for the company. She sold me out to save him, Silas said, his voice breaking. She's been like a mother to me since my parents died, and she stabbed me in the back. People do desperate things for the people they love, Elena said quietly. She looked at the photo of her own father on her desk. That doesn't make it right, Silas said. She's destroying thousands of jobs. She's destroying my legacy. We have the proof now, Elena said. We can go to the board. We can expose Cross and Veronica. The vote is in 3 hours. It's not enough, Silas said, shaking his head. If we show this to the board, they'll panic. The stock will tank. Cross will buy the scraps for pennies on the dollar. We need to kill the deal, but we also need to save the company. We need that $100 million, Elena. Real money, not just evidence of theft. Elena looked back at the screen. Her mind began to race, the eidetic memory pulling up threads of information from the thousands of documents she had scanned over the years. Wait, she said. Her eyes widened. What? The Cayman clause, she said. The one I warned you about at the restaurant, subsection 14B. The one that gives Cross my IP? Yes, but look at the jurisdiction, Elena typed furiously, pulling up a map of maritime law zones. The contract lists the jurisdiction as the Seychelles, but the assets, your software, the drones, are physically located in Nevada and California. So, Elena turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face. There's a conflict of laws. Under the International Trade Commission, Rule 337, if a foreign entity, the Seychelles Shell Company, attempts to seize intellectual property that is critical to U.S. national security, the assets are automatically frozen by the federal government pending review. I don't follow, Silas said. The drones, Elena said excitedly. You said they were for logistics, but do they have military applications? Technically, yes. The guidance system is dual use. Then we don't need to find $100 million, Elena said. We just need to make your company untouchable. How? We don't reject the deal, Elena said. We sign it. Silas stared at her. Are you insane? You told me signing it was suicide. Signing the original contract was suicide, Elena corrected. But if we amend one line, just one line, designating the drone software as defense critical, and then sign it, Cross triggers a federal investigation the moment the ink is dry. His funds get frozen. The $100 million he transfers to you? It clears into your account, but he can't take the assets because the government locks them down. You keep the money and the company. Cross gets nothing but a subpoena from the Department of Defense. Silas looked at her. The brilliance of the plan washed over him. It was a trap set within the trap. You are dangerous, Silas murmured, looking at her with a new intensity. I'm just a waitress, Elena shrugged. No, Silas said. He stepped closer to her, closing the distance between them. The morning light was filtering through the dirty window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. You are the smartest person I have ever met, and you are saving my life. He reached out and tucked a strand of loose hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The chemistry that had been simmering all night boiled over. Silas, she whispered. Elena, he said, his voice rough, when this is over, when we win, I don't want you to go back to being invisible. I don't think I can, she admitted. He leaned in. His lips brushed hers, soft and hesitant at first, then firm and demanding. It was a kiss of desperation and relief, a seal on their partnership. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, forgetting about the files, the money, the danger. For a moment, there was just him. Silas pulled back, breathless. He rested his forehead against hers. We have 2 hours until the board meeting, he said. We need to draft that amendment, and I need a shower. I can't walk into the boardroom smelling like server coolant and fear. Elena laughed, a genuine sound. Bathroom is down the hall. I'll make more tea. And then we go to war. The heavy oak doors of the Sterling Vanguard boardroom swung open at 8 a.m. Silas Sterling walked in, looking like a man marching to his execution. Behind him, Elena Vance held a stack of folders, her head bowed in submission. At the head of the table sat Damon Cross, spinning a gold pen in Silas's chair. Beside him, Veronica Thorne looked pale and sick. You're late, Silas, Cross smirked. Ready to surrender? I've reviewed the reality, Silas said, his voice flat. I can't fight the board. I'm ready to sign. 100 million. Same terms. A shockwave went through the room. Silas gestured to Elena. My consultant has the final copies. Just a minor administrative update for the Department of Commerce regarding export controls. Elena placed the document in front of Cross. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the gamble of a lifetime. Cross glanced at the page, seeing only standard legal jargon. He didn't notice the phrase, defense critical designation. He was too focused on his victory. He signed the paper with a flourish. Silas signed next. Done. Cross grinned. He tapped a key on his laptop. Funds transferred. 100 million. Get out of my office, Silas. Suddenly, a jarring alert echoed from every phone in the room. Cross frowned and looked at his screen. His face went grey. Alert. Office of Foreign Assets Control. Transaction flagged. Assets frozen. What is this? Cross yelled. Why are the assets frozen? Silas stood up, shedding his defeat like a heavy coat. Because you just attempted to transfer military-grade intellectual property to an offshore shell company without a federal license. The room went dead silent. We amended the contract, Silas said, his voice cold. By signing, you triggered an automatic DOJ investigation. Under the Patriot Act, your funds are seized and the assets are locked down. You paid me the money, Damon, but you can't touch the company. You tricked me, Cross screamed, lunging across the table. Actually, Elena spoke up, stepping forward. She plugged her USB drive into the projector. We did more than that. The screen behind her lit up with the Neptune Supply Cumbers ledger. These are records of bribery, corporate espionage, and blackmail, Elena announced to the stunned board. Damon Cross has been sabotaging this company from the inside. She clicked a button, showing the dossier on Veronica's sick husband, and he blackmailed Veronica Thorne into helping him. Veronica stood up, tears streaming down her face. It's true. He promised to pay for my husband's treatment. He forced Arthur Pym to wipe the logs. He did it all. Lies, Cross shouted, grabbing his briefcase. I'll bury you all. The doors burst open. 2 FBI agents entered, leading a handcuffed Arthur Pym. Damon Cross, the lead agent said. We have a warrant for your arrest for securities fraud and racketeering. As the agents cuffed him, Cross stared at Elena with pure hatred. You, who are you? Elena walked up to him, standing toe-to-toe with the man who had destroyed her family. I'm the girl who poured your coffee, and I'm the daughter of Marcus Vance." The color drained from Cross's face as the realization hit him. The ghost of the man he framed had come back to haunt him. 3 months later, the Azure Lounge was bustling. Silas Sterling sat at table 4, watching the kitchen door. Elena walked out, but the beige uniform was gone. She wore a stunning emerald evening gown. She was no longer invisible. She was the new CFO of Sterling Vanguard. She sat down and slid a thick envelope across the table. "The district attorney just finished. My father is fully exonerated. His name is clean." "He would be proud," Silas said softly. "I'm proud." "I couldn't have done it without you," she smiled, "and I'd be bankrupt without you." Silas reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. "One more item of business, a merger proposal." Elena opened the box to reveal a flawless diamond ring. "It's a lifetime contract," Silas said, his eyes vulnerable. "Joint liability, full partnership, no exit clauses." Elena laughed, a sound of pure joy. She reached across the table and interlaced her fingers with his. "I usually advise against contracts without exit clauses." "Is that a veto?" "No," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. "That's a signature." The waitress who became a queen had finally found her kingdom. And that is how Elena Vance went from serving coffee to running an empire, proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. Damon Cross learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the person who brings you the bill. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please like and subscribe. We have a new drama coming next week about a homeless man who wins the lottery but loses the ticket. You won't want to miss the twist. What would you have done if you were Elena? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.